Hello and welcome back to episode 22 of the Boxing Social podcast in association with Betfred. As always, just ask everybody to please subscribe, follow, turn those notifications on for more boxing content. Now that's out of the way, delighted to be joined today by Shane McGuigan. How are you, Shane?
Good, thanks, mate. It's a different setup, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you actually didn't come down to the last podcast, but if I tried to get you down, but you didn't come down.
I've never been invited to any podcasts.
I think I invited you on the same day as CBS came down.
No, I'm joking, you have. You've always gone for like Campbell or Groves or people like that. Do you know what I mean? So
we've had.
I get it, bigger faces, you know, more interesting stories as well. So.
I think you're probably the most interviewed person on Boxing Social in the Boxing Social history, so I wouldn't say that necessarily.
I think I am.
Yeah, quite well. Anyway, how are you? It's been a while since I've caught up with you.
Indeed, yeah. We've had some things go on in your life, haven't we, Rob? You know.
Yeah.
But we're all on the better side of that. No, I'm good, thanks, mate. I'm excited about Saturday night. It's gonna be wicked. Got Lawrence out again, defending his world title for the first time. I've been to America with Dan, which didn't last long. 2 minutes and 10 seconds of full action. Got some new signings, got some new people in the gym. So yeah, buzzing, mate. Good.
Well, it's always good to hear. And you are. I was saying to the guys beforehand that you've probably developed over the last 6 months, 6 to 12 months. One of the most, probably the busiest trainers in the UK at the minute. You've got, you know, an ever expanding stable. Something that we spoke about previously. How does that change your dynamic as trainer, having more people in the gym and kind of not necessarily turnover because nobody's really left in the last 6 months, but you've had a lot more on your plate, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had prospects in the gym, so I've always when I had Groves, Frampton and Haye, that were all sort of big time fighters. I had Taylor, Anthony Fowler, Josh Pritchard, those guys in the gym. Which were the next wave. Obviously, Josh, for instance, you know, he failed his medical and to come in as a coach, but it's kind of like ticking over, and it also brings. And look at where Josh Taylor is now. Do you know what I mean? He's an undisputed champion. So it's nice to have the next wave in, whilst rather than just focusing on championship level fighters, because like if you look at Joe Gallagher's stable a few years ago, he had 3 world champions, but a lot of them were all championship level fighters, and then quite a few of them retired. And he doesn't have that next sort of. He has now started to build up that next wave coming through, but he wasn't at the same time. I think it's always good to have a couple of prospects in the gym. So I've got 9 boxers in the gym at the moment. I think 8 of them have been announced. So yeah, there's only one that hasn't. Actually 2 that haven't. So 7 have been announced. But it's booming. That's great.
And you've just mentioned Josh Pritchard there. I always kind of laugh and joke with him as kind of Boxing Social royalty. We did a couple of really good interviews over the years. Many people who are watching this may not be that familiar with Josh Pritchard, who is your assistant, of course, former fighter as well. Yeah. You mentioned there about him failing his medical a few years ago. Yeah, when he was an unbeaten prospect. Just talk to us a little bit about JP and the dynamic of him in the gym.
He's just a nuisance, really. No, he's great. I mean, he was 19 or 20 when I first saw Pritchard. A guy called Stewie Gill. Actually, we always go out and ask, sort of if there's any strong kids coming through, any like for sparring. And I think I had Frampton boxing Martinez for the world title in whatever year that was, 2014 was it?
Yeah, something like
that. Yeah. And I asked Stewie Gill if there's any sort of come forward strong lads, and he said there's one freak from Portsmouth, and he sent him up. And I think I had Gary Buckland doing the first 8 with Carl, and then the last 4, and he brought these little pistons in. Pritchard did these little rays, punched out yellow things. And I said, take them off. Let's leave him. Leave the gloves on. That's not a problem. He's only a kid. And I said, no, put these ring sides on, which were quite padded gloves. And he'd done his 8, so he's already pre-fatigued. And then Pritchard come in and just started walloping him. And he's like, fuck me, he can bang that kid. Good thing you changed those gloves. And then we just invited him back a couple of times for the remainder of that camp. And then he was working on the roads. And I said to him, like, what do you think might go in pro? He did about 60, 70 amateur fights. And went pro, obviously. A lot of people don't know the story, but he was 5-0 at the time. Had a Cavanova in his on his brain, which is like a series of blood vessels. And year 1 they had it, but they missed it. So the radiologist sort of missed it. And in year 2 there was no discrepancy from year 1 to 2, but there was a few things that happened. The Nick Blackwell thing happened that year, and multiple other things. The Eddie Gutnick thing, that was just like, it was a series of things that sort of happened, and they sort of clamped down on it, and we argued it for a few years as Juan Manuel Marquez had a Cavanova, and managed to box the whole way through his career with one. But you just got to take the doctors and specialists' advice, and a few said that he was at no greater risk, and a few said that he might have been. So the board didn't renew his license, and he came on and was an assistant of mine. December 2016 was his first month starting, and then from then on in, where are we now? We're in middle to end of 2021, and he's been here ever since. So what a guy. Fantastic support from me, and starting to get his own stable of fighters as well at the moment. So that's it's really exciting for him.
Yeah, I think Josh Pritchard asked me to make sure he got a good plug on the podcast, so we've done that for him now. There you go, JP. You mentioned there kind of about the Cavanova, obviously the Eddie Goodneck situation, which you were very close to, of course. Your dad, Barry, in his career also had tragedy in his career when it kind of really brings it home. I mean, obviously boxing is such a fast-moving sport, and I think sometimes people kind of lose sight of the actual dangers of boxing. Must be really difficult for a coach to kind of encounter those situations, bring it all close to you, or do you try and kind of distance yourself from it, or how does that kind of feed into your thinking?
No, I've got a lot of empathy. So even if I see a kid in the gym getting hurt in sparring, I pull it. I struggle with it because obviously boxing myself, I understand how much pain can be inflicted. And at the end of the day, this is a sport. It's not it is people's lifestyle, but it's still a sport. And seeing that up close, I think the Eddie Gutnick thing really hit myself and George. And then seeing a few other kids in the gym getting knocked out, like whether they've been in sparring, or obviously Daniel's in the gym now. I've seen a few people getting knocked out, and then obviously waking up, and you can just see that sort of panic on their faces, or if they concussed, severely concussed, it's that confusion, and it's just like, that's the side of boxing. That's shit. We aren't machines. We're human beings, and you can take one punch one day and feel absolutely okay, and then the second day you can feel dazed by it, and and that's just an unfortunate sport in it. But there's a lot of health and safety that's coming into it, and that's why the Board of Control, that's why you have to respect their decisions. They've withheld a lot of people's licenses, and rightfully so, because they can't clamp down completely. They don't know what the boxer's going through to make the weight. They don't know what they're going through for sparring. Like a lot of coaches, I spar twice a week. I've been accused in the past of having my fighters spar too much, but there is a fine line. And a lot of those people that have accused me, they don't know the actual type of sparring. We've done like maybe 200 rounds, but a lot of it was tech sparring, and it was going through the motions, and then there's maybe 80 to 100 rounds of open sparring. But still, there's a lot of wear and tear on the body. Whereas Campbell would have sparred 50, 60 rounds, so he didn't spar as much, but it was at the end of his career. He didn't need to grind himself. He wasn't coming in 3 stone overweight. He was always on his weight. So there's lots of variables that you can do. But also within that training camp, what you endure, there's the next phase of health and safety will be you'll have to have a brain scan before you fight every time. Now, or even to even further that, they should have these monitors in between fights, and that you come back and you sit on your stool and they can monitor. Obviously, I don't know the technology, but that's probably where we'll get to. So then they can catch the bleeds if there is a bleed. It seems very dark, we're chatting about this, but in terms of the actual health and safety, that's what needs to be done, because we'll always push our boundaries. If you've got a fighter that says, all right, well, back in the day, there's always been weight categories. There was more injuries back in the day because it was the same day weigh-in. And it's like, well, why didn't they just weigh in heavier? No, because the fight will always push that boundary. So if you say to them, all right, it's 12 stone, you're walking around at 13.5 stone, well, I can weigh in, but you're going to only have 5 hours from when you're weighing to fight. Oh, I can do it, but you can't. You know what I mean? It's a false sense of like it's a false sense of security for these people and they go, oh well, I made it, but then it's like, well, what's your body gone through to to make that weight? And I think a lot of injuries do occur, whether it's in sparring or weight cuts, and that's why the WBC, the British Boxing World Control, that 3% weigh, and the WBC have the IBF of the 10 pounds limit. They're starting to understand these sort of giving certain restrictions so that people don't take the piss, as it were.
Yeah, the WBC have, I think it's called the Weight Management Program.
Yeah.
Which is ironically why George Groves never boxed for a WBC title under your stewardship. He did box Badu Jack for it when he was with...
that hadn't really come in.
Had it not by then?
No. The one that George didn't want to box for was
IBF because of the rehydration clause, yeah.
I mean, I remember being on the undercard, Frampton was on the undercard of Lucien Boutte versus Carl Froch, and Carl was boxing for an IBF something, I can't remember what it was. It was some version of a Intercontinental or something like that early on in his career. And obviously Froch was the IBF super middleweight world champion. Now they weighed in, and then Froch come in. So Frampton weighed in the next day. He was like, it was 122, so he weighed in at like 131.5. So it was like right on the limit. And when Froch come in, he had his tracksuit on like I'm wearing, and jumped on the scales. He was 12.5. It's like, he's only about 5 pounds, and he's probably got nearly 2 pounds in that clothing, in his shoes. Now, in the UK, you've only got one chance to make the weight. So if so it's 168, right? If they're 178.5, but they've got clothes on, you can't re-weigh, so you won't be able to box for the title. Even if it's up to you to jump on the scales, and you have to be under 178 pounds. Doesn't matter what you're wearing, if you're wearing nothing or if you're wearing clothes. So Lucien Boutte, his coach, was running up the stairs, checking his scales, running down, checking. They did it about 5 times. Froch just sitting around waiting on him. And then Boutte comes in in his boxers, and he's dead. Just to make the 178 pounds. And I felt like going straight to the bookies and just lumping on him, lumping on Froch. Just like, it's okay being tight the weight on the day before, but you should never be tight the next day. And if that's the case, and you got a restriction within the IBF, he should never have boxed for that title. But doesn't mean if he'd have been able to put on 30 pounds if he'd have beat Froch. It's just you just think like that would have been a big hindrance for George, because he did put a lot of weight on. But whereas other people not necessarily. It was actually quite good for Carl, because it kind of allowed him not to overeat.
I don't know how we've got to talking about weight, but
But as a percentage, actually going back to that, as a percentage,
this is what I was going to ask.
£10 of 122 that's a big percentage. Whereas 10 pounds of 10 pounds on a 200 pounder is a small percentage.
That's what I was going to ask next. I am always keen to speak to you about kind of the physiological side of things and making weight and what have you, and keeping your strength. 10 pounds to somebody who's making super bantam is completely different to somebody who's making super middle or light heavy, isn't it? Do you think that's something that needs to be revisited or looked at?
Maybe, but I mean, I've seen a lot of like bantamweight, super bantams put a lot of weight on, not much more or not much less than what a super middleweight would. Because I think the body, it doesn't matter how big it is. Yes, there should be a percentage or like in terms of that, but the body has a lot of fluid in it, and obviously the bigger the muscles and stuff like that, you can draw a little bit more fluid out of it, but like not huge amounts of difference.
Right, moving away from making weight and what have you, I want to talk about some kind of things, I don't know, over the space of your career. You've obviously been not only kind of in boxing for as long as you've worked in it, which you kind of, you're 32 now, so...
Thanks for that.
Sorry, mate. Well, there we go.
Nearly 33, actually.
There we go, in November. But anyway, so you've been a trainer now, lead trainer for about a decade, just over around then? Is it around then?
Probably.
About a decade. What is your highlight moment of your time as a trainer? If you could pick one moment to relive, I know it's a difficult question, but what would it be?
I don't think I'd relive any of them. But what was my favourite moment? Probably Chudinov and George, or Santa Cruz and Frampton, the first one. Those are the two that stand out.
spoken about Frampton. We've never really spoken about Carl that much in interviews. Obviously, there's been various reasons for that over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
His name has come up 4, 5, 6 times, and we've only been speaking for 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You were very close with Carl once upon a time. You're obviously not now. The last time you saw each other was a few weeks ago in a very very tetchy period of time in the bubble.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, just talk to me a little bit about that, about the relationship with Carl. Of course, you enjoyed enormous success together. I mean, as a boxing fan, before I'd even thought about working in boxing, you were, people who I remember staying up to watch that first Leo Santa Cruz fight in New York in my dad's living room at 4 or 5 in the morning. But obviously things have changed as they often do in boxing. What do you make of kind of things now compared to where they were? Obviously, there's an awful lot of water under the bridge.
Specifically with him, or in yeah. Well, it's a bit of a shame, really. I mean, he was my first sort of poster boy, as it were. Do you know what I mean? He's my first sort of world champion. I've known him for a long time. We used to, we boxed in a few tournaments together and stuff like that back in the day. But like, lots of things change, and like, if you can't get too hung up and sentimental on things, because life goes on. And looking at it now, like, yes, I was upset and cut up about certain things and the way things ended and stuff like that, but that's people's choice, and like, would I change anything that happened? Absolutely not. No, because it was a fantastic experience. It's a great memory. And it's held me in good stead in terms of from those, not just from the good, but also from the bad. I've learned some lessons, and like, Carl lived at my house for 7 years. Like, none of my other fighters lived in my house for 7 years, but he did. He was like a third wheel to me and my partner for 7 years. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was too on top of each other. Everything was too close. And I've got great relationships. I've got great relationships with Groves, Campbell, CBS, Robbie Davies, like all of the guys. Obviously people like Lawrence and stuff, like, very good relationship. It's very much a working relationship, but over time, originally it was a very working relationship. Now it's starting to, we got very good rapport and banter and stuff like that. But like, there has to be a level of professionalism, and not just from me, but on both sides. But no, in terms of going back to it, I mean, it's like, it was a great journey. Like, there was some amazing moments, and I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire. Do you know what I mean? It just, I'm not bitter about it, and I don't think he should be either. And in time, I think he'll understand that there was a lot of good that was done there, not bad.
Do you think there'll come a time in the future where you two will sit down over? I know you don't drink, but sit down over a non-alcoholic cocktail and maybe look back? Or
probably not, because there's opportunities throughout the time that we could have. There's a lot of things that was going on, and we could have, not been as nasty, as it were. And I think there's, like, I don't sit and reflect on that relationship very often. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, for me, it's just another fighter. Well, now anyway it is. But back in the day, it cut me up a little bit. But I've looked at it from so many different angles now, and I'm like, do you know what? It was great whilst it lasted, but that's all it was.
Did that influence? You mentioned kind of the fighters that you have a good relationship with now. Obviously, Campbell, George now retired. CBS still active. I know Lee McGregor also lived with you for a period of time. Did that kind of shape the way that you try and manage relationships with fighters moving forward?
No, because you can't let someone you can't let a tarnished relationship reflect or influence another relationship. Everyone's an individual, and everyone has their own different morals, and you can't paint everybody with the same brush. And like, Chris is for instance a fantastic lad. He's been in my gym the longest at the moment, and you know, there's a lot of shit that's been said over the years that he's been in the gym. And you know, one thing that Chris will do is he'll always he will never let somebody else influence his like decision on somebody. He'll always just use his own brain and think, wait, I'm going to weigh it up and understand that whatever is being spoken about has that occurred within his relationship, and it hadn't. So he was like, no, I'm going to keep these people in my career, and that's why I got a lot of time for Chris, because he had the intelligence to understand it, and yeah.
Before we move on and talk about kind of the guys in the gym at the minute, let's talk about your dad. Haven't seen him for a little while. I think the last time I saw him, or last time I heard him, would have been across the other side of the ring at Fight Camp when
Definitely
Chris
would have heard him.
Definitely would have heard him.
Yeah.
How is he?
He's good. Yeah, he's really good. Yeah, he's been. He's just been in the gym, mate. There's not a lot that's really gone on with Baz. My brother Jake he's had a baby recently, so him and his wife Tash has had a baby, so he's just loving life with the grandkids, and he comes into the gym probably twice a week. Gives his gives his sort of knowledge and his bits of advice here and there out, and some people really appreciate. I was talking to Robbie about it the other day, Robbie Davies, and it was like, obviously his dad, I think his dad went to the Olympics before my dad, and I was always so sad what happened to his dad. His dad died of pugilistic dementia, but he said even though his dad wasn't a coach, every time he boxed, his dad would come up to him and just say one or two pointers that would just fill him with a load of like reassurance and confidence. And it's like, he said, I love when your dad's there sparring, because even like I'm just overthinking it. I start overthinking it because I'm not impressed because I'm in this new environment. And he says one or two points, it just goes, woof, and it sort of gives him that level of comfort. And I was like, I know, because I think I sparred maybe 5 times without my dad for the whole way through my amateur career. I would never not spar when he, I would never spar when he wasn't there, really, because it was just I loved that sort of support and comfort, and it doesn't actually. That's the sign of like you got these coaches like myself, this sort of new age coaches, but then you got these old mentors, and someone like Nacho Berestein or Customato, like they didn't do the pads, they just said one or two bits of information, and it's like that just went so far with certain fighters. Now I'm trying to blend a bit of both, like the new age and also keeping that level of sort of like key points, and once you've been there, done it like Dad has, you just don't question it. And now obviously people don't question my decisions or my comments because I've had 4 world champions, got loads of people in the gym and stuff, so they're like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. But originally they were like, you only boxed amateur, so it's like, so you're fighting for that, you're fighting for that sort of, not the respect, but to be able to get your point across without being questioned. And Dad definitely has that aura about him.
I don't know what the boxing translation would be, but you always hear it in football where somebody kicks every ball and what have you. That's very much your dad, even now when you see him at ringside, or even when I've been in the gym, when you had guys sparring in the gym, he does live and breathe every second of it through the fighters, really, doesn't he? Yeah.
He's so invested. My mum just says he just doesn't switch off. Like the other day, I went down to see him and my mum, and we were watching can't remember what show we were watching, and I could hear this like quiet sort of like murmur on his phone. I said, what are you watching then? He's like, oh, nothing. And I was like, I think I hear that voice, and it was like, you could hear it was like Irish commentary. So he was watching like the Irish Elite National Championships. He used to always watch them whenever I was boxing to see what my competition was. But then it's like, he's still watching them now. And this was like 13 years on. Do you know what I mean? He's just watched. He's obsessed with it. But he's also likes to see the new kids coming through, and I think that's one of the things that he would pride himself on. It's like, well, I knew that kid was going to be good, you know. I knew Taylor was going to be a superstar. Like when a lot of people didn't necessarily think he. Obviously, like the Commonwealth Games, he looked good in that tournament, but he had a few WSB performances that he got overwhelmed and didn't look that impressive. But you know, like that, like I'll give him his credit. Like he's just a ridiculous spotter of talent. Like in terms of scouting, Lee McGregor, Chantel Cameron, Taylor, Frampton. Do you know what I mean? A lot of these fighters that weren't necessarily established, like Lee McGregor, for instance, he was always coming second best to Peter McGrail, but he was like, he's going to be a good pro. And especially at the lighter weights, you can really suss them out there. But yeah, because there's no guarantee. How many great amateurs have looked the part? And it's like, well, which ones are going to do something? You know, right now in 2021, even though 2020, the games, which ones are going to prevail? I have an indication which ones I think are going to be good, but there's no guarantee. And you might get a cut as ones that surprise you.
What's the most important? We're veering over to you now.
Yeah.
The most important thing that you look for in a fight. What's the most important trait for you?
I think. So I don't watch boxing and look at it and think like. I would look at the lower weight divisions and think, all right, well, he sets a high pace, got decent power, but I wouldn't look at, he sets everything up off his jab and he does this. It's like, okay, he's got really good feet. From flyweight to featherweight, he's got really good legs. He can maintain that distance and he's got a really good high tempo and he can punch in combination. He's got good balance. He doesn't lose his balance after he throws 1-2, 1-2-3. He's keeping his balance. Whereas you look at middles, super middles, and you think, all right, has he got a good chin? Does he have a good jab? You know what I mean? Can he fill the gaps? That's what you got to figure out when you get to super middle and up, because it's like the difference between 5-a-side football and 11-a-side. There's way more space between the passes or the shots, as it were, and who fills the gaps the best, and who's got a good chin, and all of it in the professional game all goes down to toughness across every single weight division. Who can endure the most amount of pain? That is one of the biggest, attributes that a fighter has to have when he goes professional.
Is that the same? I'm guessing that's the same is true for in gym, in the camps, as well as the fight.
Who can push themselves as well when it comes to training? Who doesn't feel sorry for themselves? There's so many variables that can make a champion, and it's like, and not everyone has all of the ingredients to. But there's so many champions that haven't had those ingredients. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many. Like, if you actually read Sugar Ray Leonard's book, he struggled so much with discipline and stuff like that. But he was incredible. Do you know what I mean? But he had a great chin, confidence, charisma, decent punching power, unbelievable hand speed, great fluidity. Like you wouldn't see any great that had a chink of toughness, because they all had it. They all have toughness, and that's the pro game will always figure you out. And that you can fiddle yourself, fiddle your way through 3 threes, and you can kid yourself. I should have said sorry. You can kid yourself on that, and you can kill the clock, and you can fake the training, and you can let your talent do its work. But when it comes to 36 minutes of boxing with 11 minutes of rest, you just can't. You can't fake it, and that's why people get found out in the pros.
We've spoken about the fact that you came into the sport as a lead trainer very young. You're now kind of crossing over, not to say that you're not young anymore, but you're not a spring chicken anymore. You mentioned kind of the Customatos. Bill Miller was another, Eddie Futch, but get into that kind of. Could you see yourself in 30 years' time still being involved in the sport at all? We've spoken about this over a number of years, and your answer has changed. At times.
It's always going to change.
How do you feel now about it?
I love boxing at the moment. I go through these waves of, it's not necessarily I never don't like boxing. Sometimes I don't want to watch it. I get home and I'm like, do you know what? I'm so tired. All I want to do is watch Family Guy or something that just switches me completely off. But I do really enjoy boxing. Like I can't go for longer than 2 weeks without wanting to get back in the gym and work on technique and certain things. And as I said, I've got 9 fights at the moment. I'm doing a hell of a lot of physical work. Can I do that in 20 years? Absolutely not. Will I have to figure out ways to sort of change my methods? Yeah, but one of the things that I believe gets me so much success when it comes to coaching is my work ethic at the moment, and it always has been. I used to sweat I still do. I sweat through about 3 t-shirts a day, but now I do 1 less session a week when it comes to pads, and I stagger it and try and structure it better. So I'll evolve. I'll sort of change my methods, but to be a good coach, you have to have good fighters, and if you put the effort in early on, you'll attract good fighters. And that's not necessarily to say that you're not going to put as much work into those fighters. They need less work. They need more tweaking. But if you can tweak them in the right ways, it can go a long way. And I think over time, I want to get to the stage where it's like Emmanuel Stewart. He had the pick of whoever he wanted to work with. And like, that's ideally where I'd want to be. I wouldn't want to go in just for 8 weeks like he used to. I'd want to make sure they're in all year round. But yeah, I think, what am I, 32? Probably mid-40s, and then I'll go more into like management or something, or maybe punditry or something like that. I'll try and always like to keep involved with it because it's my life.
Just want to backtrack a little bit because it's reminded me of something that you've told me before.
Yeah.
Mentioned Sugar Ray Leonard. You've taken him on the pads before.
Yeah, he's rapid.
Tell us a little bit about that, because obviously he wasn't in his prime at that point. But what was that experience like?
I couldn't catch him. I couldn't catch the mitts. I was like, but he was hitting them with like, he originally started flicking them with his hands, and then he put like, I think he put these little mitts on or something, like little bag mitts, and it was just like freakish speed. And he was what? I think he's around Dad's age, so he'd have been like, that was in 2011, 2012. He was freakish speed, honestly. But just, I mean, I was a bit starstruck. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, that for me, Sugar Ray Leonard for me is like David Beckham for a lot of people. It's he's the guy. He's my favorite fighter. So obviously I wasn't able to watch him, but I don't remember him boxing. But just from all of the footage and seeing him online and studying him and just thinking, it's just what a guy. But yeah, no, I took him. It was before the Freddie Flintoff was whilst we were doing the Freddie Flintoff documentary, and he's a friend of Dad. So Dad sort of said like, "Look, I've got this thing. Can you come down and can you watch him?" And sort of give him a few tips and that just for the cameras. And he was like, "Yeah." And then whilst he was explaining something to Freddie, you got Freddie Flintoff who's learning how to box, and he's got Sugar Ray Leonard trying to explain how to open-handedly flick rather than turn the knuckles on the shot. And I was like, let's just get him to just get him to just jab first. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, no, it was amazing. I wish I would have been able to have like him come down the gym when I've got all my fighters now, so he could give his expertise and 1 or 2 pointers, because they go so far.
Did you have? Was Mike Tyson around then as well?
Mike Tyson come, about a week or 2 later.
What was he like? What stage of Mike Tyson was that? Because there's been various stages. Vegan stage of Mike Tyson.
So I met Mike Tyson when I was 15. Maybe it was about a year into boxing, and I was like, just buzzing. I mean, he was doing a book tour with like Big Joe Egan or something, I think it was. And he was in that like nuts sort of like, you just looked at him and thought he's either gonna like shake my hand or just punch me in the face. I don't know what's going to happen, but I remember like shaking his hand and thinking like, God, that's scary. You know what I mean? Because he had that like that glisten in his eye, and I was just like, whoa. And he was bigger then, and then he came back. What would that have been? Maybe 8 years later, and he was vegan, and it was just like a different human being. I'd like to meet him now. He's like just reinvents himself. He's like better than Madonna at doing it, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like I think he has his own weed farm now.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, at the time that he came down to do the Freddie documentary, I think he was skint. Well, declared bankrupt, and his level of skint and a normal human being's level of skint will never be the same. And he's one of the most recognisable faces on the planet, so he'll always have work. But it's like he'd obviously done a silly amount of money. It's great to see what he's doing right now. It's just great to see him. I don't think he'll ever be fully happy, but he's a lot more content than what he was years ago, for sure.
That whole Freddie Flintoff thing, we've never spoken about that either. That must have been an experience.
Yeah, Freddie did well. 22 kilos dropped. 4 months, he went from nothing to having a professional fight.
How did it come about?
He did a bit of the pads with Dad after one of their, like, they did a talk show, and I think he's mad into his boxing, so he did a bit of pads, and then Dad said, you know what you should do? You should have an amateur fight. He said, yeah, I'd love that. Or like a white collar fight. And then he was like, I'd like to just do a proper amateur fight. And then next thing you know, Dad and Freddie were both with the same PR agents. And then they just brainstormed over like one day. Like, what about if we just do like a professional fight and you do this whole process? I think at the time, Freddie wanted to get his head like sort of stuck into some form of training, and he was heavy. He was about 117 kilos. He was heavy. He was unhappy. Maybe he was like 118 or something. And that was what his goal was. I don't think his goal was actually, I want to have a fight. It was, I want to do loads of boxing training. I want to drop a load of weight, and I want to get myself on a straight and narrow. And he did that. He dropped 22 kilos. But then when it came to crunch time, when it actually came to the fight, I don't think he enjoyed it. But he still went through with it in front of about 5,500 people. I was talking about Denton Vassell versus Ronnie Heffron the other day. That was the chief support. That was the chief support to Freddie versus Chad Dawson or something. Not
wasn't Chad Dawson.
No, they had the same name. I think they had the same name as
Was it?
Chad Dawson, yeah. Because I was like, it's a different... I think I remember making a joke about it's a very different Chad Dawson. But no, that guy had been stabbed, shot at, and it was a good story. But I mean, it wasn't a very good demonstration of elite boxing.
The fine art, the noble art of boxing.
But you can't discredit him because he went through with it, and
the pressure and the scrutiny on him must have been incredible.
99% of the general public would not be able to go through with it. And what's more, he suffered bulimia and fluctuating weight, and you know what I mean, and loads of things. But I mean, he dropped 22 kilos to train. I remember he couldn't even do two. He couldn't do 2 chin-ups. I think he could do like one and a half chin-ups, and then at the end of it, he was doing 4 sets of 10 to 12. So it's pretty good going. I mean, he changed his, and what's great is he still kept the weight off. He still looks good. So yeah, sort of implemented a solid lifestyle.
Yeah, you never know. He might come back unbeaten.
Hopefully for his sake. I don't think he should do it.
Well, we'll see. This didn't intend to be Shane McGuigan, This Is Your Life. So we'll only do we'll do one more kind of blast from the past, so to speak. Let's talk about your time with David Haye.
Okay.
Obviously a very different time in your life. Number of years ago now.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you?
It was good. Yeah. Different.
Because how old were you when you guys got together?
So it was
you would have been
September 2015.
So you'd have been about 26, 27? No?
Yeah. So I think it was 25 when Frampton beat Martinez, and then he boxed Avalos in February, so I was 26. And then, it was September, so I was 26, just about to turn 27. And then I worked with him from 2015 to middle of 2017. So what, just shy of 2 years. But we obviously had the Mark the Mori fight, and then we had the Arnold Jurjai fight, and then the Belly fight. So yeah, the one where he snapped his Achilles. So it wasn't ideal. But I got David at a very strange part of his life, I think, and there was limited amounts I could really do with him. You know, his body was breaking down all the time. He couldn't spar. He could spar, but yeah, he didn't want to spar. And every time he did have hard spars, he would get injured. And I think like that is enough writing on the wall. I mean, I remember speaking to him and saying, you have to be battle ready, and to be battle ready, you have to go through the process of battle. In terms of even if it's with bigger gloves on, head guards, you have to go through that process. You can't just go from hitting mitts and bags and just relying on your reflexes and your speed and your timing, because you won't have timing. If you've only had, I mean, he had 3 rounds in like 5 years or whatever it was from when he retired. Demori was around, Jurjai was 2 rounds till the Bellew one. It was like crazy. And he probably didn't do much more than 20 rounds of sparring. You know, it gave me anxiety, genuinely, just thinking, we have not done any sparring here. Like, there was, you know, it's just goes all against my ethos and training. But the opportunity was there, and I liked David, and I understood the predicament that he was in with his body. So it was not an ideal situation, but was I confident? Absolutely not. When we not even going into any of the fights, because I just thought something could happen here. And you know, obviously that fight with Bellew, but he done his left Achilles in training, and he snapped his right one in the fight, because I mean, it's like you get super compensation. So because you're taking the strain off the left side the whole way through, you're putting more emphasis on the right leg. But no, it was definitely, once again, it was another experience that I've learned from. You know, and like got a lot of backlash. You know, you shouldn't have let him stay in there for so long. And hindsight's a great thing. I definitely shouldn't have let him stay in there for so long. But myself and Jimmy Tibbs, who's more experienced than me, but we're 2 experienced people in the corner. Says, because like David was riding the shots throughout that first Bellew fight, and he hit Bellew enough times or cuffed him enough times that Bellew wasn't committing with his shots like he did in the second fight. And also I said to David, you need to stay heavy, because he was walking around at 105 kilos. He wanted to come in at about 96, 97. I said, no, it's way too light. Now, he ended up doing his Achilles, but he was wearing these bloody Vivo things, so they had no heel on them. And if you go to any sort of expert when it comes to shoes, they'll tell you, like, if you are going to go barefoot training, you need to gradually do it. You either wear it for training and then wear your other shoes for walking around, but you don't train and you don't go from 0 to 100, because you're constantly walking around with an inch platform, and then suddenly you drop that an inch, you stretch your Achilles, and your muscles lengthened, and your muscles not used to being in that position. Obviously, we, you know, primal years, we would have never wore shoes, but like we have wore shoes for the last 10,000 years or something. So it's like, well, you know, you need to bring that back in and do it slowly. But I can't remember what was going off on that one. But yeah, it's no, like we didn't get enough training in, but it's a lesson that I learned. And you know, I like David. I do like him, and I think I wish I'd have got him when he was younger, because you know, but then again, he had that level of crazy. You know, everyone has that level of, like, most fighters. I mean, Lawrence has it as well. They go for their camp. Oh, I'm going to stay in shape for this one, and then you just don't hear them for from them from a month, and they're living the life and they're going nuts, and it's just like, come back in the camp, and you know what I mean. It's this constant battle that you have with your fighters, and you know, Adam and David, you know, he probably couldn't control him when he was out of camp. He had to go and get a big fight to go and deliver for him, so then he would bring him in, and then say, all right, now you're in, you know, concentration camp almost. Don't go out the doors, you know, stay in the camp and train, and you know, they got so much success from each other. So you can't say that they should have done things different. But I mean, if you'd have said to me, like, would you have liked to work with David Haye? Yes, 100%. Would I have preferred it if it was 2008, 100? Yeah, that's, of course. Yeah, his body was able to withstand the training camps. His body wasn't at the end. So, but he wanted to get too light for that second fight, and that's what I was going off on. And I told him he couldn't weigh in, and like, he had to weigh in at 100. So he weighed in at 100, and by the time he walked in the ring, he was about 101, 102. But because I knew once he got light, when you sit heavy and then you get light, you get vulnerable. And for the second one, you could see he was like 97 kilos or something, and he got hit with a shot and he was out. You know, like it was. I think the weight was one of the things that takes away people's resistance. I mean, Derek Chisora got knocked out by Dylan White in the second fight. It was in the best shape possible. He looked the part, but he was too light for what his body was allowing him to. Especially at that age, he should never have got too light, because you take away the punch resistance. And when people get heavy and then they cut weight later on in life, like Roy Jones, once he went to heavyweight and came back, boxed Antonio Hart, he got knocked out. So it's like, it's something you can't allow yourself to do, in my opinion.
What do you think of David Haye calling out Tyson Fury?
It's a publicity stunt. Yeah, I think it's a publicity stunt. I think it's something that generally eats him up, because I think he believes that he could have beat him in 2013. But yeah, David had a few bevies that night, you know, and I don't know if he still stands on that point that he believes he can beat him. But if you watch that interview, I think it was with Michelle Joy Phelps, I think he had a beer in his hand. So it was like, if you ask him honestly now, does he think he can win? I'm not sure he thinks he would. I mean, it's just, you know, his best days are behind him, and unfortunately, as fighters, you know, you always want to reminisce, and you always think like you can still do it, and it's but my dad made a good point. I remember him telling me ages ago, he said that the fighter is the first person to know, but the last person to admit it to himself. Right, and that could be what's going on now.
Fast forward to this weekend, we've spoken about Lawrence Okolie, of course, makes the first defence of his WBO cruiserweight title against Dylan Prasevich. I'm not too familiar with Prasevich. I'm sure you will be at this point. A lot of people looking at it as, you know, quite a routine defence for Lawrence Okolie. But obviously, Prasevich will be coming with his own plans to upset the apple cart.
Fast hands, decent movement. So he'll be quite elusive. I think he could end up going on the back foot and trying to sort of walk Lawrence onto shots. But we'll see. We'll see what what he's made of, really, once he starts getting clipped about, because Lawrence has got such a good jab, and it's something that he neglected in the early parts of his career, but now I've really drilled it into him. And once he starts getting these guys at the end of the jab, it's so much weight in it. It'll be interesting to see how he holds up if he continues his movement, because people get settled on the jab. Guys that are sort of movers and fidgety sort of fighters, once you start nailing with the jab, they start setting more. And as soon as he starts setting, I think Lawrence will take him out. But it'll be interesting, because he'll be dangerous and he's fast, so he's got to be switched on. But it's just, that's boxing, you know. You've got the WBO that have ordered it, and he's the mandatory, and he wouldn't take step aside money for us to go and unify. So it's something we got to go and get out of the way. You got obviously Josh Taylor, after he boxed Richard Prograis, he had to get rid of that Thai guy, you know, before boxing Ramirez, and these things happen. You know, if you got a person sitting there waiting for a long time, the governing body will order it that you have to get rid of them. So, or fight them, as it were. And the WBO have ordered that, so because it was for a vacant title, we had to box on mandatory within the time frame, and this is it. We'll get rid of this, and we can go on and move on to bigger and better things. You got Bradis, who's just announced that he's going to be staying at £200.
Chasing the Jake Paul fight.
Well, I think he is, but I think he's also staying relevant at 200. I don't think I think he understands that there's no real opportunities yet for him up at heavyweight. And actually, by the time he gets up to heavyweight, he could be too old. But there's good money at cruiserweights now, so why would he go and risk it to go and fight a Hrgovic or a Daniel Dubois or people like that? These guys up at heavy, when he can, try and have an advantage for size down at 200. I know, I think myself and Lawrence have said it enough times the last couple of weeks that, not the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months, that we want the Bradis fight, and I think that's genuinely enticing him to stay. I think he'll fight Lawrence. He could even be next. I'd like that fight before the end of the year. I'm putting pressure on Eddie to say, look, you've got to deliver us a unification before the end of the year. Obviously, myself and Will Harvey at 258, we're both on the same page. Lawrence has always been in a rush and a hurry to get places. One of the reasons for that is because he's super ambitious, but he's massive for the weight. He knows he needs to get everything done before he moves up, and we want titles yesterday. So get this out of the way. He's going to be out before the end of the year, and we want a unification, whether that's in Garbu. I think Eddie's about to sign Gulamari and Egorov. Those two are boxing for the WBA super title. And the winner of them, we can either box or we can box Bradis.
And unification, you wouldn't have to do the rehydration clause, is that right?
Yeah, not on the unification. Yeah, but I don't even think it would affect Lawrence. Even though he's massive for the weight, he doesn't actually put that much on because he brings his weight down quite slowly.
How beneficial has it been for Lawrence and also for Daniel Dubois to have them both in the gym together? Myself and my colleague over there were very fortunate to come and watch them spar a few weeks back. Looked like great work, but also looked quite spicy at times.
Yeah, look, I've always been one for having open sparring, but Daniel's 112. Well, he's 108 kilos now. I've brought him down a few kilos, but after this holiday that he's out in St. Lucia at the moment, I don't think he'll come back at 108. But Dan's he's a killer. He's a guy that spars hard. He's not someone that tech spars. He's a guy that he's an imposing character, and if he took that away from himself, I don't think he would be anywhere near as effective. So that's Dan's game. I need to work on closing the distance and being able to, keeping his base, not falling in, and being able to fire in combinations and speeding them up a little bit. But it's great work for Lawrence. It's far too heavy work anywhere like within 6 weeks of a fight. But early on in the count, when Lawrence is heavy, it's good sparring. And it's beneficial because the two of them, they don't have egos, but they're big presences. They're big presence in the gym, and the two of them are, like looking at each other. Right, we're going to do this curve session. Like, it's me or you. Let's go for it. And it's great. It's good. That's that healthy competition, but there's no animosity within it. Especially not yet. It's something I'm going to have to be aware of and manage over time, especially if Lawrence moves up to heavy. But there's enough fights out there for both of them to have, and I think the two of them will be massive faces in the future for heavyweight boxing. And I think I'll be proud to have the both of them in the gym. So hopefully it doesn't get to the stage that they clash. But Lawrence is managed by AJ, who's going to be a heavyweight. So if Lawrence moves up to heavyweight, that's at the same time a bit of a clash as well. So, but there's enough other opponents out there for them not to have to box each other, unless there's huge demand. Like there was, I remember when the Klitschko brothers both held the belts, and everyone wanted them to fight each other, which is like, it's mad.
How excited are you by Daniel Dubois? We spoke about him for a number of months. Obviously, before you officially announced him, you've said to me for a number of years that you've always wanted to have a world heavyweight champion. That is a very realistic proposition now. Of course, with Lawrence, if he moves up to heavyweight, but also Daniel and the longevity that he could potentially have under your stewardship, being so young and having that opportunity to mould him must be so exciting for you. Yeah,
and he's responding really quickly now.
He looked like he had a great time in America, by the way.
Yeah, he's buzzing. Like he's really coming out of himself. He's happy. He's enjoying himself. Like, his dad's happy with the setup as well. So the two of them seem really happy. I've got Caroline that is joining, and you know, it seems like a great fit. I wish I'd had longer for that first one. We were going to link up in end of January, early February, but there was a few things that went on. But you know, you can't look back on that sort of stuff. We are here where we are at the moment, and I believe he's going to win a world title. I really do. The Joyce fight was just unfortunate. You know, yes, he looked limited in it. He looked like he ran out of ideas, but there was a lot of variables there. You know, that eye went early on, and for anyone that says, you know, it was a spoof or something like that, he didn't get this. I went across to all of the medicals with him 8 days before that bloody Bogdan fight. I thought everything was going to be off because he hadn't gone back and seen the specialist and the surgeon that did his surgery on his eye. So, you know, he's that eye's recovered. It hasn't damaged his confidence, and that was one of the things that I was worried about, as it damaged that fearlessness from Daniel Dubois, because Dan is a fearless character. He just doesn't bat an eyelid. Like, he's literally a frontline guy. You just go out there and go forwards. You know what I mean? But we need to tweak him. We need to work on certain things, speed him up. And his body is starting to adapt to the training. You know, he's spent a lot of time training within himself. He needs to really go through the gears, but he's doing the circuits and everything, and his performances are coming up. I need to start figuring out sparring partners that are going to test him more, because Lawrence tests him, but the two of them can't just do endless rounds. You know what I mean? So I need to start bringing in more sparring partners, people from abroad. And getting guys that are movers, because those are the guys that he struggles to pin down. So working on his weaknesses a little bit, but you know, he's turning. I think he turns 24 either like in 2 days, or he's the 24th or 27th or something like that. So he's only a kid. He really is, and as a heavyweight, that's so young. So got high hopes. Do I think he's going to be world champion? Absolutely. Do I think it's going to be in the next 12 months? Probably not. But if the opportunity does present itself, you know, we need to be ready to get going and be as good as Daniel can be. And he spent, ever since that Bogdan fight, he spent the whole time in the gym. This is the longest he's been off, and it's been, 3 weeks or something. So, yeah, you can't fault it. And he's in the gym, he trains hard, and he seems really happy. So I'm buzzing about it.
Is it going to be, I know Trevor Bryan's been in there, it's been talked about for a long time. The Joe Joyce rematch is something that Dan has certainly said that he wants. What are we looking at next for him?
Well, I think we'll have to sit down. You know, Martin Bowers from the Peacock Gym, he manages him, and Frank's his promoter. So, you know, we've been speaking on the phone a lot, myself, Martin, and Frank, and we're striking up a good relationship, and we're all working together for Daniel's benefit. So, you know, the three of us will sort of rack our heads together, but you know that he needs some tests now, but gradual tests. You know, he can beat Trevor Bryant for sure. Where do we go after that? You know, like what are the tests after that? Because he'll definitely beat him. It's just, where are we going after that? We need these solid names to continue to build his profile before the AJ and Tyson Fury fight. You know, because I think he'll get one of those guys. Maybe at the end of their career, whether that's in 3-4 years' time. I think he will.
Before we talk about Anthony Joshua and Oleksandr Usyk this weekend, let's touch upon Anthony Fowler. Of course, he's a couple of weeks away from a big fight in Liverpool. I'm very excited for that. How's he looking in the gym? And again, it's something that we've not spoken here, but we've spoken about in the past about, you know, your willingness to kind of put your fighters in with, you know, stiff opposition and give them those tests in their career. A lot of people looking at this as a massive step up in opposition for Anthony against Liam Smith, obviously ex-world champion, boxed at a very high level. Yeah. But you're very confident in him getting the job done on October 9th. Why is that?
Oh, look, from what I've seen in the gym, and from what you can't sit there and reflect on the Scott Fitzgerald fight. You know, he wasn't himself that night. He was he just let it all go to his head. He thought he was going to knock him out. He boxed him in the amateurs, and there was lots of things that he did wrong. He was with another coach, and Dave was a very good coach, but Fowler just thought it was going to be one-sided. So he's sort of learnt his lesson, and I think he's going to thrive to be the underdog, because let's not make any let's not beat around the bush here. He is the underdog. Everyone thinks he's going to get stopped, but I know he's not. I really do, and I've seen it. I've seen him in the gym, man. He's not the same fighter that he came to me, because he's able to tie people up. He's able to diffuse people. Ant used to try and punch people up off him all the time. You can't do that with these tough guys. You've got to learn to, touch, move, hold, grab, just spoil them a little bit, frustrate them. And he's got good legs. He's got great movement. It's just he can do it in the gym. He just done 12 rounds yesterday with a Russian who's I think he was 15-1 in the WSB. He's an absolute killer. He's really, really good fighter. So he did 7 rounds with him and 5 rounds with another guy. And he's flying in the gym. We need to get it right on the night. But his weight's good. It's the first time he's ever been going to be headlined. So there's a lot of variables on Ant's shoulders, whereas Liam he's fought Canelo in front of the biggest of audiences all over the world. So that's a huge positive to Liam. He's fought for a world title. He's been involved in bigger fights. But freshness and styles, Fowler has the style to beat him. He does. And we weren't going to get this fight. If he went another route, Fowler did, he would never have got the Liam Smith fight, because he's going to fight Jesse Vargas, maybe 1 or 2 more fights, and he would never. The more Fowler showed, the less likely Smith was going to be to box him. Now, Liam has had him in for sparring, believes he's on another level to him, and is super confident, and he's super up for this fight. So we can't think that he's on the slide, but I just know, I've seen enough about Liam Smith. I think he's a great fighter, but then this is nothing to discredit him. I believe that Fowler's going to beat him. And if/when he does, puts him on another level, and then we can get these big fights, and then we can get the recognition, and we can get the fights that he deserves. And he is a bit like Marmite. He says certain things that people dislike, and he should bite his tongue a few times, but he doesn't. It's just he wears his heart on his sleeve. But he's a top lad, and he's got a great heart, and he lives for boxing, and he puts everything that he has into boxing. You know what I mean? All of his energy, all of his effort, all of his thoughts, he puts that towards boxing. All he wants is for himself to succeed in boxing. And I believe that mindset, with the right coaching, with the right tactics, wins that fight and elevates him, former world champion, just catapults him up into another level. And he'll be a headliner. Because the problem is, if you don't take opportunities in this business, you won't, you'll be forever within that box, that category. And this is a huge opportunity, and it's a hugely winnable opportunity that we've taken, and I believe it's going to pay off for him in leaps and bounds.
Well, we look forward to that. I think it's going to be my first show back, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Looking forward to fight week with you, mate.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Finally, I just mentioned that Anthony Joshua versus Oleksandr Usyk, a fight that I've been very, very excited about for a long time. I've wanted to see it for an awful long time.
Yeah.
Where do you stand with it all? Seems to be the general feeling is that Anthony Joshua will be too big for Oleksandr Usyk on the night. What do you feel is going to happen on Saturday night?
I think size and physicality will/should play a factor.
I sense a but here.
There is a but, because the but is Usyk's not a huge puncher, but he's an accurate puncher. Now, AJ doesn't need to be hit with a huge shot. He just needs to be hit with the right shot. He sometimes overthinks things. Now, you can't start overthinking when you're in front of Oleksandr Usyk because he's a box of tricks. He's the juggler. So I don't know. I was hanging around them yesterday, and there's an air of confidence within Usyk and his team, and that's never really a good sign, because you can kind of, I've been around boxing so long that when you're in the fight bubble and you're seeing the teams and stuff, there's always a few that are bricking it. You know what I mean? Whether it's the manager or other people, they're always making problems. Oh no, this isn't right, that's not right. Whereas everything's calm with them. It's spooky. But it's also like, he believes he's really going to win this. You know, and I'm not saying that, I haven't seen AJ, so I'm sure his team and stuff have that level of confidence. And look, if you said to me, Shane, to last £100, put it on a winner, I'm putting it on AJ 7 days a week. But there's still that question mark to say, what if? You know, Tony Bellew got knocked out by him, and that was just such an accurate shot. It was whilst he set it up so well, and he buzzed them a few times, but he didn't go rushing for it, and he was really disciplined behind it. And he buzzed Chisora a few times in that fight, and Chisora's got a great chin. So has he got the power? Yeah, he's definitely got the power, especially when someone's committing to him. He's able to walk them on and time them. But AJ's quicker than Chisora. He's a bigger specimen than Chisora. You know, all of these things end up, there's always a counter argument for it. And he doesn't track as methodical as someone like Gasayev. Probably doesn't punch much harder than Gasayev, but punches in combination better, sets it up, has a bit more size and sort of speed towards him. So there's loads of different arguments, but all I'm saying is I'm so intrigued, because it's not just a walkover. And whoever thinks that it's just going to be like a one-sided beatdown, it's not the case. And I would be extremely surprised if it is, because out of the two of them, who's been buzzed throughout their career? AJ's been buzzed by Dillian Whyte. He got hurt to the body as well by Dillian Whyte. Got hurt with a headshot. Got stopped by Andy Ruiz. Got dropped by Klitschko. He's got, he overcame that Dillian Whyte. He overcame the Klitschko. Being dropped, got up, regrouped, went again. He went and rebuilt after the Ruiz fight, but there's been lots of times when he's had to ask questions within himself. Usyk's never had to ask questions within himself. And like, you think, well, if everything does start to crumble with him, does he have those answers? That's one argument. But then you also think, but why has he never had to ask questions for himself? Because he's that good technically. So if AJ tries to stand off and play the fast game, tries to sort of sharp shoot with him, I think he's going to get frustrated. And then if he gets frustrated, is he going to walk in and be gung-ho, kamikaze? So, and walk onto something? I'm not sure. I'm giving you all these different answers and breakdowns, but I think AJ's going to win, and I really hope he does win, because it's great for boxing, and I hope Tyson Fury comes through this and we can get that fight, because it's something that we haven't seen in our lifetimes, and even like people like my dad's lifetimes. There's not heavyweight world champions from these islands, and basically be able to box and unify and make an undisputed title. So that's something that us as boxing fans, from being over here, that's something we want to see. But Tyson Fury has the beating of Deontay Wilder, but this is not an easy fight for Anthony Joshua.
Okay, well, I think we got there about there with that breakdown. I think it's the sign of a good fight. I think
it is. That's what I'm saying. It's great that we're having these debates, or that I'm even having them within myself, because it's breaking. You got to look at it from all these different angles and think, what's really going to go on? It's like, okay, put your money on it. AJ wins. What rounds does he win? He wins 9-12 late on, but 9-12 by a stoppage. But if he doesn't get it, if he doesn't find the shots, if he's feeling a bit flat, it's it's a fucking hard fight. So let's hope he's on point.
Final one, because it kind of ties in quite nicely. Because you started the podcast talking about weight and slimming down. We spoke about David slimming down. We've seen Anthony Joshua in the photos of him with a slimmer physique, and obviously saw that in the Ruiz rematch. That indicates to me that we are going to see Anthony Joshua move more than potentially we would have done pre-Ruiz 1. How do you think the more slimline physique will work for Anthony Joshua? And also, we've seen Oleksandr Usyk look to bulk up and really grow into heavyweight life. How do you think the two physiques and the two weights could...
Do you reckon Usyk has?
Personally, I don't think he's going to be...
I don't think he's going to be much heavier.
Some people said... So we saw him on the scales, I think, in his camp, and it said it was 230. But I think if he would have trained that back, so that would be about...
101? 103?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't see him being that heavy on fight night. I think he would have
he's around 100. I mean, look, like most cruiserweights would be walking in at 97. So if he's walking at 97 when he's boxing Gassev, that's only 3 kilos difference. That's not a big discrepancy of weight. But if he's trying to walk in at 107, then that's going to be a lot. And that's going to take away. He's a skilled fighter. You should never try and overthink things. And that's the thing about AJ, is how much has he overthought this? You know what I mean? Like, don't overthink it. Because if you do, if you even overthink the weight, what are you going to do when he starts moving and shifting around you? And then you're just going to start overthinking, all right, well, I've done that. Oh, shit, you could count me with this one. Don't overthink it. Just be a savage, like Alan Babbage. Just go straight through.
That would be an interesting style change for Anthony Joshua.
Yeah.
But yes, okay, I think we're
be
about
ruthless. I don't think he should worry about moving and weight. He's obviously slimmed down. He said the other day about the weight, he just said, I just go whatever I feel like. And I understand that, because sometimes you can, different weather outside can change how much you're eating and, and how much you're training, and different types of training that you're doing. You might just end up, his S&C coach might have been just doing it different sessions, trying to work on more like power endurance rather than just pure power stuff. So it's like that might have changed the different variables and time, so he might be doing a little bit more, which naturally brought his weight down. But AJ's he's always looked the part, but I don't think it suited him when he was too heavy, like the Klitschko fight. Probably his best weight was around the Dylan White times or Charles Martin, stuff like that, where he's, I think, what was he, about 17.5, 17.4, something like that, 17.75, 17.4.
Yeah, around then. He was 16.10 for the or 16.12 for the Ruiz rematch.
Yeah.
And that was the lightest it'd been for a.
Well, he was working very much on moving. He shouldn't be working on moving against Usyk. He should be working on sort of applying the front foot pressure and then dropping back, but just enough just to keep him under pressure. Nudge him, control the centre of the ring, cut the ring off well, but as soon as Usyk goes to sort of fire, drop him back and either meeting him, drop him back and countering him, or meeting him with a shot on the way in. And that's just, that's something that he naturally does anyway, because he's got good legs. But I wouldn't say try and overthink it and try and move with him, because it's just he's just so sharp.
Okay, well, we look forward to seeing it this Saturday from Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Shane McGuigan, always a pleasure catching up with you. Haven't seen you in a little while.
Yeah.
Glad to see you looking well. I'm sure I'll catch up with you sometime soon. If not before, then October the 9th in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for popping on the Boxing Social podcast.
Thank you, mate. I need some of that merchandise.
We'll give you some. We'll give people a little look at the merch now. This is one of the t-shirts that are available. I have to be careful not to show off my belly.
Or your scars.
Or my. I don't. I do have a scar on this side.
Oh, really?
In between my rib cage. Yeah, where they put the chest tube in me, which is a story for another podcast, I think. But anyway, let's have a little look at the merch. I'm gonna.
Do you want me to hold that?
I'm gonna move so I don't accidentally show my belly.
You do it.
So we've got.
I got them all right, didn't I?
You did get them all right. So we've got, this is one of our t-shirts, which will be available soon on the Boxing Social Shopify. We've got, this is our, I don't know what we've called it yet. We have to come up with a name for the shirt, but some iconic shorts from over the years. Do you want to run them through quickly? What we went
left,
through?
Manny Pacquiao, No Fear. Then we've gone for the Velvet Marvin Hagler. Then that's the only one I was a bit suspect of. That's
Come on,
Mike.
you're supposed to be selling it.
It's Mike Tyson, but I don't know why they've got
If you go back and look at the Tyson Spinks fight, you can see the little markings on the shorts.
But that's not his. And then below that on the right. We've got your right, my left. We've got Muhammad Ali. Then we've got Apollo Creed. Then we've got Tommy Hearns or the Kronk Gym.
Yep.
Then down there we've got Ricky Hatton, which is a suspect. And then we've got Ken Buchanan.
Yep.
And then we've got Nassim Hamid.
Yes, we certainly have. All available from the Boxing Social Shopify account sometime soon. But we're going to have to let you go now, Shane. Thanks very much for popping by. And to you for watching episode 22 of the Boxing Social podcast with me, Rob Tebbutt, with him, Shane McGuigan. Thanks very much for stopping by. We'll catch you soon.